Good morning. Please be seated. As you were. How is everybody? Good? You're to be commended for being here. You know, it's the middle of summer and everybody's sort of on vacation mode and you've chosen to come to church. I think that's a wonderful testament to your character and this parish church. So, here we are. My wife started off last week, if you remember, with a survey. And I'm not going to do a survey per se, but I'm going to ask a question. How many people here, and I want you to raise your hand if you agree with this statement or vote with your hand. How many of you here like to have your worlds turned upside down? Raise your hand. Anybody? Nobody. Well, you know, we had one guy at the last service, remember? And we had one guy last night, and his wife slaps him on the hand and says, "Stop that," you know. But no, you know, I understand that. Nobody wants to have their world turned upside down. I mean, clearly you have a way you do things, it works. Sometimes these things we do are the best thing for us, sometimes they're okay for us, sometimes they're not even really that good for us. But they're familiar, and it's getting us down the road, it's getting us down the path, so we do them anyway. And nobody wants to have all that stuff turned upside down and you're disoriented, you don't know what you're doing, you're not sure about the path. It's human nature, beloved. You know, if you look at the term Good Samaritan, you'll see hundreds of allusions to it. A lot of it is hospitals. You know, there's probably 50 hospitals in this country that are Good Sam hospitals, including a big medical center in West Palm Beach. And it's one of the most preached topics on the planet is the Good Samaritan. And it's looked at in 100 or 1,000 different angles. I don't want to look at it in one way this morning. It's a little different, perhaps. I love talking about vacations. We just got back from a vacation in California. And I'd love to tell you about that. I'd love to show you the pictures of it, but we can save that for a different day. And the Hastings here have just gotten back from a 3,600 mile or 7,000 mile, whatever it is, sailing vessel trip. Oh my gosh. They have pictures too. That'll be later. But I want to tell you about a trip to California we took when we first got married. It was like a delayed honeymoon trip. It was part business. And we went to Los Angeles, went out to Irvine for business. Then we went to San Francisco. And then we went to Beverly Hills. And I want to tell you about our leg in Beverly Hills. Who here's been to Beverly Hills? Raise your hand. Anybody? Ooh, fancy crowd. That's what you get, officer. You get a lot of swells in a place like this. It's that Beverly Hills, and we were on Rodeo Drive. Rodeo Drive, as you know, if you've been there, is like Worth Avenue on steroids. You know, it's very fancy, it's very wealthy, you know, it's a lot of sharp elbows, and we were there during the time when financialization was just occurring. In other words, there were a lot of money circulating in the economy. People were throwing down hundreds of dollar bills. Hundreds. Credit cards flying. And at the time, the yen was very strong. So there were a lot of Japanese tourists. And so the sidewalk was filled with tourists. The sidewalk was filled with locals. When we were in the Louis Vuitton store. Anybody here know Louis Vuitton? See, you buy Louis Vuitton bags, like if I buy one, the bag is worth a lot more than the clothes in it, you know. So we were in the Louis Vuitton store looking at stuff. There's a crowd of people. It was like there was a sale going on, and they never have a sale at Louis. So there's hundreds of people all around the street and the store, and all of a sudden I hear out in the street, "I don't know about you, but I'm ready to meet Jesus." Thought, what was that? So again, I moved a little towards the door. I heard, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to meet Jesus. Amen. Thank you, sir. So I had to go see what was making that racket. So we went outside. We fought our way through the door, out through the crowded street to this corner where Louis Vuitton is located. And there on the corner was an old, frumpy preacher. Maybe black man, maybe what, 65 years old? And he said, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to meet Jesus. So I went over to him and I shook his hand. And I said, sir, I'm ready to meet Jesus too. And I shook his hand and we had a moment together. And it was funny. His hand was kind of puffy and swollen, like retaining water, heart disease, puffy. And I realized, looking back on this moment, that this old preacher, who was completely out of place on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills, was probably dying or close to death. And he was ready to meet Jesus. That preacher and that beautiful man has stuck with me to this moment. It's informed my ministry, and I think about him all the time. I mean, not all the time. I think about other stuff too, but I think about this guy and I think, wow, this is really an amazing, amazing man. And I want to talk about him a little bit in the context of this passage. What does the text say? I'm going to read you the text again from the NRSV, because it's got a little better from the Greek. The text says, just then a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Lawyer. You know something big's coming when a lawyer stands up to test Jesus. Somebody who knows the law. Any lawyers in here today? They won't cop to it now, see? Okay, no lawyers, all right. At least no admitted lawyers. Just then, a lawyer stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, Rabbi, he says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus said to him, what is written in the law? What does it say there? See, if you go into a synagogue or temple today, you'll see a little bit of this kind of interaction still today. This is the way Jews have felt out the law to find their path. What does it really say, and what does it mean? So there's a little bit of coyness going on between these two here, but this is not just a test. This is an earnest effort to engage the rabbi. What does it mean? What do you mean by that? What do I mean by that? The man answered Jesus, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Bingo. Where have we heard this before? This is from the horse's mouth. We've heard Jesus say this. That's the law, the summary of the law. Love God, your neighbor. Good answer. And Jesus said to him, you have given the right answer. Do this, and you will live. Here's where the plot thickens. But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? Rabbi? Who is my neighbor? And so Jesus doesn't give him an answer saying, it's Mr. Hastings, or it's Mrs. Rafter, or it's the cop on the street corner. He gives another answer. He gives a parable. He doesn't answer the question with an answer. He answers it with a story. Jesus is very inscrutable sometimes. Sometimes it's very edifying, and sometimes it's kind of annoying. Just give me the answer. Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers who stripped him, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. Now, This area was frequented by Jewish travelers all the time. That's the route, from Jericho to Jerusalem. And it's a rough neighborhood. And so this guy goes down there, a Jewish traveler, gets beaten up, robbed, boom, left for dead. Now, by chance, Jesus says, a priest was going down the road. When he saw him, he passed on the other side. See, the priest, beloved, is a functionary of the temple. The priest is the guy who interprets the law. The priest is the guy who leads the worship. The priest is the guy who knows the ropes. The priest is the guy who knows how the law is. He knows how we've gotten to where we are, and he knows that it's going okay. I want to keep it just like it is, because I'm profiting from it. I've got a job. Plus, to keep the Romans off us on one side, keep the Assyrians off us on the other, keep the Syrians off us on the other. It's worked historically, so let's just keep going this way. I see this guy over here, he's half dead. I don't want to touch him. If I touch a dead guy, I've got to be 10 days purification. 10 days where I'm out of work. I'm not going to do that. Besides, this guy might be dangerous. I don't know what he is. He might be a Samaritan. He might be somebody I don't like. So the priest makes a judgment. I'm going to go straight. I'm going to go to the temple and do my job. That's the law. He's living by the law. So likewise a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. Who's a Levite? One who wears Levi's? I don't think so. See, I said that at 7:30, nobody laughed. What do you make of that? You know, it's too early in the morning at 7:30. It's not somebody who wears Levi's. It's a temple functionary. You know, and it's like the band could be Levites. Somebody who serves the bread can be a Levite. That's what a Levite is, but it's somebody tied to the temple, somebody who knows the procedures, somebody who knows the law, somebody who has a job. And that job is not to stop and help some half-dead guy. Again, purification laws. You defile yourself by touching a dead person. It distracts from what your job is. The law has you prescribed to do X, Y, and Z, and you go and do X, Y, and Z. It's always worked. It's worked for Judaism. It's gotten us where we are today. It's going to keep us moving straight ahead to work within the boundaries of the law. That's what the Levite said. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. Who's a Samaritan? Samaritans are kind of like Jews. But years before, there was a big falling out, and they became like competitors. The Samaritans wanted to have a different temple in Gerizim. They wanted to do different things. They intermarried with Gentiles like you and me. And the Jews didn't like them at all. The Jews excluded them. They didn't even want to touch them. They didn't want to associate themselves with them. And the Samaritans weren't too crazy about the Jews either. In other words, they were separated wholly. They never interacted. But what happens? The Samaritan comes along. The Samaritan gives aid. And what kind of aid does he give? And this is where Jesus really piles it on. Jesus is not making any friends here with this discourse. But a Samaritan, while traveling, came near him, and when he saw him, he was moved with pity. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, having poured oil and wine on them. Then he put him on his own animal, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, "Take care of him. And when I come back, I will repay you whatever you spend." A blank check. Like buying a timeshare. Sorta. Who are we in this story? This is part A of the story. Who are we? Are you the priest? I'm a priest. I hope I'm not that kind of priest. Are you the Levite? Are you the Samaritan? When I started looking at this passage to preach on it, the first thing I did is I started putting myself in the place of the half-dead guy. You know? I was once a half-dead guy myself. And I didn't care at that point. I mean, the half-dead guy doesn't care who helps him. He'll take help from whoever is kind enough to offer it. Jesus asked the lawyer, "Which of these do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" And the lawyer begrudgingly says, "The one who showed him mercy." You see, the lawyer can't say the Samaritan. It's so out of his bailiwick, it's so out of his area of expertise, it's so yesterday. He can't even say the word Samaritan. He says, "The one who gave him mercy." Jesus says, "Go and do likewise." Go and do likewise. See, the context, beloved, is a story about someone in need, clearly, but that's not what the story is about. The meaning of this parable is Jesus telling a story from the perspective of eternity. He's changing the course of humanity in his time with his people. It's what's imperative and what's not imperative is being redefined here. The great lesson, beloved, is Jesus is reversing. He's turning the world on his head. He's reversing the ideas of judgment and mercy. You see, the Levite, the priest, they made good judgments. But Jesus is telling his Jewish brethren, no, we're going to do it differently from now on. All that judgment that you had, all the ways we've done things, all the ways that have worked, all the things that appeal to you as a human, I'm turning them all on their heads and calling upon you to be first and foremost merciful, loving, caring, giving people, no matter who is in need, or where, or what, or how. This is a big change. This changes all of Judaism. It changes all of humanity. It changes everything that we've always done that always worked. Jesus is saying, no. Turn it over. How do we do that? What does it look like? Jesus says, go and do likewise. Be like the Samaritan. How do we do that? You see, because this changes the world. And I can tell you from my personal experience, if your world has not been turned upside down, you have not yet fully encountered Christ. Because that's his business, is taking the status quo and inverting it for the use of the kingdom. When I look at it, how do I be like that? I think of that old preacher in Beverly Hills. I want to be like he is or was. You see, that old preacher, he took responsibility. He recognized there was a great need. It was the need for Christ in that place at that time. Do likewise. Find out where the need is in your circle. He had a clear vision of what was and what could be. And he was acting on that vision. Beloved, get a vision. A church does that with you. Fellowship does that with you. Your family does that with you. Study of Scripture does that with you. The old preacher took a risk being out in that street corner. He was way out of place. He took a big risk. Now, he was discerning. He wasn't blocking the path. You know, we just sent the kids to Ecuador. We put them on a good airplane, a good airline. They have chaperones. You don't do stupid things. But they took a risk. They're taking a risk. They're doing something dangerous for the kingdom. The kingdom, beloved, is a dangerous place. Aslan is not a tame lion. The old preacher broke all kinds of social barriers. He just went for it. He was way out of place there. He stuck out like a beautifully sore thumb. Whatever barriers, beloved, you have and I have, Jesus compels us to break out of them, to push them back. You may not succeed, but Jesus says you must reorder your life and you must try. And you're going to break a few eggs doing it. Trust me on this. And lastly, this old preacher didn't seek a reward. He wasn't looking for a prize. But what he got was a closer relationship with Christ and a better idea of his place in Jesus' eternal companionship. That's our prize also. You keep your eye on the long game. And the world doesn't want that. Wall Street doesn't want that. But we need to be like that. We need to turn all that on its head and play Jesus' long game. Beloved, make the move. Take the risk. Even gently turn your lives upside down and start to really enjoy your place in Jesus' life and his eternal kingdom. Go, beloved, and do likewise. Amen.